Welcome into another edition of the Top Prospects podcast. Got another exciting week of baseball around the league. So, Logan, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, Chris. I mean, another week of baseball going by. We're officially in the month of June, so we're almost at that All-Star break area. But MLB in full swing. Another week of action went by, and I'm doing great.
Yeah, I mean, the Phillies have won two series in a row, and I changed on what is it? The MLB The Show, changed my settings so I can hit the baseball now. So my guy is raking right now since I figured out how to do that down to just like, average. I got to be hitting over like 300. So pretty exciting. Also the Phillies, two straight walk-offs. So pretty
Yeah,
fired up
so
about that.
so I guess dynamic wasn't working out too well. You had to switch over to like the rookie veteran type range.
Yeah, I think I switched over to veteran. Dynamic was brutal. It had me up at like between like Hall of Fame and Legend or whatever, like a month and a half into the season, and I'm like, I'm in double A. Like, what are you doing here? Like, I started out hitting at like 350, and then I took a nosedive to like 200 because I couldn't hit anything. But we're back on track now, as much as the announcers continuously insult me for not being able to lay off a single pitch.
Yeah, the announcers can be brutal in that game sometimes. I mean, dynamic. I've never really tried to use it myself. I've always been like kind of like a veteran type guy, but yeah, I mean, you're in Double A for a reason, and I'm glad that your MLB The Show career has sort of taken off in a way.
Yeah, I'm excited. They mentioned possibly a promotion, so we'll have to see. Hopefully that's around the corner. But it's nice to be talking about prospects, and then under your name it'll be like, oh, Chris Lemmo, top 50 prospect in minor league baseball. It's like, yeah, okay. Like I don't think I wish I was that athletic in real life. But anyway, here moving to some real life baseball. The big story this week has to be it was really a big article in Sports Illustrated about I guess they called it a sticky situation, so to speak, around baseball with these banned substances that are really all over the league. I mean, I know obviously the Garrett Cole thing, which I guess you could talk about. He got kind of called out for that, but he's not the only one.
Yeah, and this has been kind of like the big debate throughout this season. We've seen these offensive numbers start to plummet compared to the last couple of seasons, and these strikeout numbers, these spin rates have been at an all-time high. And ever since it was called out and Garrett Cole had that one bad start, he's been kind of under the fire as of late. And he had this interview, which we've talked about, a lot of MLB fans know about it, where it was famous for him just not even saying anything. He was straight up asked, do you use like special substances to help get a better grip on the ball? And he just flat out avoided the question. And it kind of brings to mention, one, is Garrett Cole using this? I mean, obviously that interview kind of brings to light that he might actually be using that. And then the other thing is how many of these pitchers are using it. And then Pete Alonso, the New York Mets, actually brought up an interesting point. He was kind of asked about it himself, and he said that the MLB and Rob Manfred kind of manipulates this based on the free agent class. When it's a dominant pitchers class, they'll juice the ball so that hitters can make them look bad, and then vice versa. And he actually gave some pretty decent examples of recent classes. So there's a lot of players, a lot of hitters kind of in belief that these pitchers are using that. Josh Donaldson said the same thing about Garrett Cole and then got promptly smoked by Garrett Cole when the Twins play the Yankees. So it's going to be an interesting debate for sure, especially when the MLB starts to crack down on on all these special substances in the weeks to come.
Yeah, they're going to have to. So the Sports Illustrated article here mentions A lot of different substances, honestly. I know that there's a couple of things. I believe one was Pelican Grip that pitchers have been using, and the other is I believe it's called Spider Tack. And there's a bunch. I mean, for a long time, pitchers have been using rosin, and they've actually been using some tree sap, stuff like that. None of the substances have gone too deep. I know sunscreen was another big one. In fact, I heard that even in the minor leagues, they would keep sunscreen kind of stocked in equipment rooms. Not every team, obviously, some teams. And pitchers would, use it, they'd rub it in discrete places and be able to use that on the ball. But that's almost, I mean, not to say that that's okay. I mean, obviously, the rule book says that that's not. But now it's gotten to the fact that in this article, they're saying that teams are actually hiring chemists to create their own blend for the franchise, not even the major league team, all the way down through the system. They're recruiting these guys using, saying, "Hey, come here. We have this awesome blend that will make your stuff spike, your pitches spin better and your stuff play up better. And ultimately you'll get more money and play better that way. So that's why you should join our organization." It's crazy. It's almost being used as a recruiting tool, which is far deeper than I imagined this going. I kind of thought, okay, these guys are using weird substances, maybe beyond, sunscreen. But the fact that they're actually like brewing this up like in a lab is crazy. It's something that's going to have to be fixed. I mean, obviously, and not to call out specific players, because again, we don't know who's using it really all yet, besides Garrett Cole, who basically all but admitted that. Um, the big spin jump has been from Trevor Bauer. Like it's not even close. He has the biggest jump in his spin rate. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens, because that Dodgers staff as a whole, in this article, it mentions, is by far the biggest spin rate jump year over year, 7%. Than the White Sox, Red Sox, Nationals, and Yankees in that top five. So, in terms of other teams, like I believe the Mets was his 10th or 11th down there, but it was only 1%. So it's going to be tough to figure out. But I mean, this has to be stopped, right? I mean, I would think that this has to be top of mind for the league.
Yeah, and I feel like that's kind of been the big focus on the MLB right now. And you brought up a big point, and I want to stick with the Garrett Cole, Trevor Bauer examples that we kind of been harping on here. They both got big paydays in the last couple off seasons. How big a part of that was due to the special blends that teams are using, whether it's due to that spider tack type thing, or how much of it was due to skill? It's really you don't really know if it was because of that stuff that helped out their spin rate, or are they actually worth that money? And that could be a big thing in this offseason. There's going to be a couple guys who broke out this year, maybe because of that stuff, maybe not. And that's going to be the risk that a lot of teams are going to have to take. And you talk about the numbers that are going up right now. The Mets are lower on that list. I feel like there were some people that were calling out Jacob DeGrom this past week, and there were about five Mets players that came into his defense. I think Tomas Nido, Kevin Pillar, Taiwan Walker, Marcus Stroman, and they all just went into his defense, DeGrom's defense, just saying no, he's just simply the GOAT, like he's from another planet. So I mean, it's really about the specific player. I mean, in that case, Jacob DeGrom, the players seem to have his back, but you don't really know exactly who's taking it. And the investigation in the next couple of weeks should be interesting to see like how they really approach this.
It's definitely going to be interesting to see what they do in terms of. I think it might lead to suspensions. I mean, that's what kind of triggered this. Was minor league baseball actually saw four players suspended, and that's the path we're kind of going down. I believe. I mean, maybe some of these pitchers have gotten, I guess, scared straight, so to speak, and that they're stopping. I believe, was it? It wasn't Trevor Bauer. Who was it that his spin rate was down one start and everybody was questioning him? I
It
guess
was,
it
it
was
was
Garrett
Garrett
Cole.
Cole.
Yeah, it was Garrett Cole. So, maybe these guys are going to kind of figure out, okay, they're on to us now. So hopefully that will stop it. But I really don't know. I think Major League Baseball is going to have to step in here and maybe start issuing some suspensions. Now, per your point about Garrett Cole, or not Garrett Cole, Jacob DeGrom, his stuff, you can really tell by the spin rate and that kind of stuff. Okay. If you see like a sharp, I guess, rise in spin rate, and it seems like the fastball is kind of the pitch that's the bellwether, so to speak, in terms of it, it really is the one that matters the most. It doesn't, he doesn't have the spin rate that rapidly increases. So you can see that I really don't think he's using. That would be an absolute shock, and I think his teammates clearly know that and have his back on that. Now, looking back to the whole Trevor Bauer thing, what's interesting is that the Sports Illustrated article notes he used Pelican grip in the first inning of a 2018 start, and his four seamer, which normally averaged 2,300 RPMs, was up to 2,600 RPMs. And then after the first inning, it dropped back to normal. In 2019, in that interview, he told Sports Illustrated, if I used that blank, I'd be the best pitcher in the big leagues. I'd be unhittable, but I have morals, end quote. Well, from March through August of that year, his spin rate was 2,358, according to this article here. And in September, it jumped to 2,750. And then last year was up to 2,779. So my question is, what happened there? I mean, like, look, maybe he's not using, but I'll tell you, if Trevor Bauer can't see where people are coming from, in that all of a sudden his pitch count or his spin rate jumped after he showed exactly how he could make it jump, it's suspicious. I'm curious what you think. I mean, do you think that a suspension is going to be what it takes to get this under control?
Yeah, I think it probably would take a suspension at that point. And there's definitely the chance that he could have been training to get his spin rate up. This definitely could have been natural. It's unlikely, but it could have been natural, and I'm not counting that out. But I'm very curious to see how the MLB kind of approaches this investigation. Where would they have umpires check pitchers whenever they leave a start? Would they do it after every half inning that the pitcher pitches? It would slow the game down, that's for sure, which I know Rob Manfred wouldn't like at all. But if that's what it's going to take to get these pitchers to stop using all these substances, then that's what they're going to have to do. And it should be interesting to see how they approach that. But yeah, I mean, there is the chance that a lot of this is natural. We'll see how these pitchers, if they choose to stop doing what they're doing, we'll see if those numbers start to go back to earth. And I guess the way we're going to find that out is how many home runs our team's going to hit in these next couple of weeks as stuff starts to go back to normal. I mean, we talked about there being a slow offensive start for all players in the MLB. So, I mean, we'll see if those numbers kind of spike up back to where we saw them back in like 2018, 2019 type form.
Yeah, I mean, I got to look up the actual numbers in terms of yearly batting average. I've seen it a bunch of times, but it's not good. Like the MLB average right now for batting is as low as it's been. I mean, it is just pitiful how bad it is. I mean, not only are the home runs down, and I think that obviously is a testament to the spin rate, I think, on pitching, but also a testament to the baseball being changed. I think that's another thing where the MLB has kind of made a mistake here. I mean, they've been switching the baseball around so much, and not to say that that could be a part of the spin rates. I'm not really sure, but I don't know. It would be nice if we could just stick with the same baseball at this point. I'm sure that's not helping matters. Now, here's the thing, and I kind of made this argument before, but now I've backed off of it a bit because pitchers these days, it feels like now, of course, there are exceptions like DeGrom. I mean, DeGrom obviously could just chuck the ball at like 101 and get anybody out. But it feels like now the emphasis is put so much on velocity over command. And, the argument, I guess, on the pitching side of things is that these pitchers need a substance to grip the ball, or else you're going to see a lot of nasty, pitches to the face, like Bryce Harper, like Pilar. So, and I believe there's been a couple others in the league this year. So the thing is, do you buy that? And if so, do you think that the league should create their own mandated product that is the only thing allowed?
I do. I think that there should be kind of a limit on how much substance a player can use, where they can use enough to get a grip on the ball, but not enough to where these spin rates are jumping out at exponential type levels. I mean, we've seen a lot of these big hits to the face because players lose grips on the ball. And over the past couple, like 5, 6 years, the velocity of these pitchers has just increased exponentially. Keep using that word, but it's true. I mean, all these fireballers coming into the league, like Jacob DeGrom, like Aroldis Chapman, just firing that ball in there. And sometimes it gets away from them. So I totally get why even hitters are okay with just having a little bit of substance used to get some kind of grip on the ball. I think that was something Pete Alonso said, but I could be wrong about that. So I definitely see where they're coming from there. I think just the point they're trying to make is just don't have too much substance where they're just getting this insane amount of spin rate on the ball.
Yeah, that's the other interesting thing is that batters really haven't spoken out about this in the past. It's kind of been an unwritten rule, I guess, so to speak, in that I think a lot of people knew that, something was off with the baseballs, but up until this year, I think pitchers have been, I don't want to say okay with it, but I think the sport has kind of turned a blind eye to it. And, I'm not sure if this is like the steroid era and that, people knew and then it took something big for them, for the MLB to finally stop it. I'm not sure what the reason is, but people clearly have known that this has been going on for a while. Like, it's not like this is something that I think just started 2 years ago. I mean, obviously, I think it's ramped up a lot, but I do think that this is something that has gone back a while and batters have been kind of okay with because, again, you want the pitcher to know where the ball is going, or else, you're going to see a lot more ugly situations. I mean, another one was, I think it was Austin Voth of the Nationals this weekend got hit by Vince Velasquez of the Phillies in the face and had to leave the game. I don't know if he broke his nose. It was pretty gruesome though. That's my only issue with taking all this stuff away is, I don't want to see more of that happen. That just isn't good for the game at a time when we already have huge injury problems. So my thinking is the MLB maybe needs to come up with their own, thing that they put out there and say, look, this is the only thing you're allowed to use. And it kind of gives them the bare minimum, I guess. It isn't like some of these other substances out there that are overly controlling. But in my mind, this is as serious as the steroid epidemic that baseball faced, the early 2000s. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
I don't think it's as serious. I think it's serious to the point where the MLB definitely has to step in and look at it. And ever since the 90s, offense has kind of ruled the MLB. I mean, we've seen home run numbers spike from that steroid era to like 2019. And every single year, pitchers have tried to find that some kind of a defense to that drive, that drive and home run totals. And maybe this year the solution was to use more of this substance. I mean, we this you're right. This isn't the first time that pitchers have tried to use substances to get a better grip on the ball. I mean, Michael Pineda on the Yankees got caught like several times in the early 2010s when he was still a member there. So this is something that pitchers have tried time and time again. And my thoughts of this is that this is just a way for pitchers to kind of get fight back on that drive. I mean, on that home run drive, and just try and get that number back down to where pitchers are dominating baseball like they were in the early days in the MLB. But obviously, offense rules all, and Rob Manfred, the MLB, the fan base, just not a fan of it. Not a fan of just the substances that they're using, and maybe they'll find a solution by just creating that one little substance. I mean, we've seen it's kind of like a sponsorship, like Nike putting the jerseys on for all MLB teams. Nike just kind of running the jerseys. It's kind of like the same thing, except the MLB is kind of controlling the substances part of just how MLB teams operate, and making your own substance for every team to use. I feel like that would be a pretty good solution. It puts everyone on fair playing ground, as everyone can use kind of the same thing, and everyone's allowed to use the same thing to get a better grip on the ball. And it takes the advantage away from teams like the Rays, the Yankees, the Dodgers, the Red Sox, who are all the top of the list, giving the advantage back to the other teams, giving the advantage back to the hitters.
Yeah, and actually, I should go back and quickly mention that this really came up last week when Joe West realized that, on the brim of the Cardinals reliever Giovanni Gallegos, that there was, I guess, an abundance of some kind of substance, and he confiscated the hat but left the player in the game. Another interesting quote from, this article was when Trevor Bauer, also in his Players Tribune essay, said that after 8 years of trying, quote, I haven't found any other way, and this is to increase his spin rate, except using foreign substances, end quote. So, I mean, like, look, I don't want to say that he's guilty because obviously we don't know for sure, but he is not doing himself any favors at all by some of these past quotes. But this is definitely going to bear watching. I mean, it sounds like, and if you listen to anything that, Jeff Passan or some of the other reporters from around the league have said, that there is an imminent crackdown on this stuff coming, and it is a matter of days, if not a week or two. So we'll have to see. It may be next podcast or within the next couple that we're talking about suspensions here. Who knows? But the MLB will certainly have to crack down on this. Now, another thing recently, we kind of touched on this before, was the injuries. So we're going to do our weekly checkup with our Mets expert here. The guys are coming back, though. How do you feel about it? It seems like everybody's starting to progress.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's really starting to progress, kind of like you said. Albert Almora, Luis Guillorme, kind of like the bench players that were supposed to be the bench players. Not they weren't part of this bench mob that the Mets were kind of creating. They're starting their rehab assignments in AAA, and then a surprise, Jeff McNeil is actually going to start a rehab assignment pretty soon, actually well ahead of schedule, probably a month or a couple weeks ahead of schedule where he was supposed to be. And Michael Conforto might be a couple weeks after him. But we talked about in the last podcast where a lot of those players came back, like Kevin Pillar, Pete Alonso, Taiwan Walker. They all came back and have played very well since then. And now this kind of second wave is starting to get into their rehab assignments, and for Almore and Guillorme a chance to get back into that Mets bench, and for Jeff McNeil a chance to be in the starting lineup once again and provide another spark for that Mets team. So, as a Mets fan who's watching his team currently in first place without all those guys, it's great. I mean, I love what this Mets team has been doing right now. Pete Alonso's been on fire since he's come back from the IL this season earlier on. Jacob DeGrom's played great. The rotations played great early on. And watching the Braves kind of struggle early on at the start of the season, the Mets are looking pretty good, Chris.
Yeah, they definitely are looking good. I mean, they have to be the favorite in the division at this point. I mean, I know the division is absolutely horrible. I mean, the Braves constantly fight to get back to 500, and then the Phillies and Braves both, neither team wanted to win the game today. They both choked it up multiple times, but yeah, I mean, it's the Mets division to lose at this point, and I think it's kind of been since the offseason. Although I know before the offseason, I kind of thought that maybe the Braves would have a chance to pull out the division, but I got to give the Mets like a 90% chance now at this point. I mean, obviously DeGrom, Stroman, and Walker pitching really well, and then Peterson's struggling right now, so we'll have to see what happens there. I mean, the question really is when do Carrasco and Syndergaard come back, if at all. I know Syndergaard had that setback, and Carrasco seemingly, I think he stopped throwing to kind of strengthen up, what was it, his hamstring or something. But um, so we'll have to see with their pitching staff. That might be where they add, a fourth or fifth starter. But I mean, other than that, I mean, they're a good team. I don't see why they wouldn't win the division at this point. That being said, there is another big storyline from this week. Now, it's fairly obvious, but in shocking news, Trevor Story has said that he will not re-sign with the Rockies. I know, huge news, really. I mean, who could have imagined that he doesn't want to re-sign with one of the worst teams in the league? So, I think really, I've been trying to think of a couple landing spots for him, and I do have one in particular, but I want to hear your thoughts first. Do you have any teams you think he'd fit well on, or do you think Colorado maybe tries to hold on to him because for some outlandish reason they think they can, re-sign him?
So I know we've talked about this a couple months ago, and I'm just trying to remember exactly what I said on that edition because yeah, it's definitely a developing story that Trevor Story wants out of Colorado. I mean, I thought he loved the place personally, but I mean, they are currently one of the worst teams. They're 12 games under 500 right now. It would have been smart for the Rockies to trade him at the start of the season, but now they're going to wait until the trade deadline, get a little bit less value, but I think they'll still be okay despite that. But I mean, looking at teams around the league that could use him. Maybe a team like the New York Yankees kind of get a little bit more spark in that lineup. They're not exactly where they expected to be at this point in the season. They're in a tight 3-team race in the AL East right now. They're 5.5 games back right now of first place. So getting a spark at shortstop for the Yankees could be the move. They tried to get Francisco Lindor. They're one of the teams mentioned, but they didn't get him. The Mets did. So that could be a potential team. If you want to talk about Francisco Lindor for a second, the Indians maybe could be out there. They're currently in second place in the AL Central. They're 5 games above 500. And with the Twins out of that division right now, at least, that opens up a potential chance for the Indians to compete. And why not try and replace Francisco Lindor with Trevor Story and maybe go on a potential run for a season, go on a little run to maybe like the wild card game, something like that, and then at the end of that season, trade away guys like Ramirez, Bieber, just get like one last run in there. So I feel like that'd be kind of interesting. And then maybe teams like the Braves get a little offensive firepower. If the Reds want to buy, maybe they can make a little run at it. They're 2 games under 500 right now, but that could still be interesting as well. There are a lot of potential scenarios out there for Trevor Story, but I would not be surprised at all, Chris, if the Rockies just say, screw it. We're going to hold on to him for the rest of the season, get no value, exactly like they did with Nolan Arenado, except they're not going to trade Trevor Story and just let him walk in free agency.
They have to. I mean, for the sake of that franchise, they have to. I mean, not saying that means that they will, but they got to get some good prospects into that franchise quickly because the farm system is not good. And I don't know. I mean, I think they got to trade Charlie Blackmon too if they can. I mean, anything that has value has to go. I mean, I know Ryan McMahon's probably somebody you might want to build around, but it's tough. I mean, definitely Herman Marquez. I think he should be going at the trade deadline too. There's a bunch of guys that have to. I think they do have a good amount of trade chips, but they're going to have to push them all in. I was also thinking the Yankees there as a landing spot for Trevor Story, but there was a report that came out. I was reading this on MLB Trade Rumors that per the Athletics, Ken Rosenthal, GM Brian Cashman, and the ownership group of the Yankees will continue to treat the 210 million luxury tax line as a soft cap. So that would give them only 4 million of accessible payroll space. So that makes it a little bit tougher to facilitate a Trevor Story trade. They're going to have some money going the other way, or I guess Colorado could eat some of the contract maybe, but they'll have to make, the money might be tighter to work. So
Do
that
the
means
Rockies really want to give a team money again to make a trade for a star player?
they honestly don't put it past them. Like they might. The sad part about that whole thing is like normally if you kick in that much money, like you're getting some really good prospects. And like not to take anything away from the guys that they got, but like they're not top 100 prospects or really for the money that they kicked in, it should be like a top 30 prospect. So, yeah, I mean, I think that they will kick in some money though, at least if it's to the Yankees because they're going to have to. So we'll have to see. I know it says Adam Frazier is another one from the Pirates. He's been hitting well over 300 this year and is making only 4.3 million. So he's actually really affordable, and I think he'll be a good middle infield trade piece for the Pirates there. We'll have to do our, I guess, trade chip rankings then at some point closer to the deadline. But for now, we're not too far from the deadline. Still, a couple weeks from the All Star break, but we are getting into June, so that means it is time for some teams to start panicking. So let's do our segment here, panic time. We're going to go with the panic button here for certain teams to see if it's a little too early for them to rebound or they need to start going all in because this is do or die time. So the first team I want to start out with is in the AL East. The Bronx Bombers, or as some have called them, the Bronx Bummers. The Yankees are in third place right now, 4 games above 500. Haven't been all that good, only +3 in run differential. So, Logan, are you pressing the panic button here?
Chris, on a segment, one of the last segments on Penn State Sports Night when we were in person, I said you should sell on the Yankees. It was a segment that we were both on, and as of right now, they do have a winning record, so I am kind of wrong about that. But then you look at the stats, and this might be the worst offensive season that the Yankees have had in quite some time. In terms of Yankee seasons all time, their strikeout totals rank probably like the highest they've ever been among some of their key players. I mean, Aaron Judge, he's played really good, as well as guys like Gio Urshela, Gleyber Torres. They started to heat things up. But then you look at that division. The Red Sox have looked phenomenal so far this year, as have the Tampa Bay Rays, and they've always seemed to have their number in years past. And now you have this stuff about like Garrett Cole and all the substance stuff. I have my little watch here. I'm just going to use it as a panic button. I'm just going to press that stuff right now. I am panicking when you talk about the New York Yankees. I think you have to make some kind of big splash. And I know that's something that Brian Cashman has always been afraid of in years past, specifically due to that soft cap that you mentioned earlier. But right now, the way that the AL is kind of shaping up, it would be really tough for the Yankees to win this division right now. And there are 4 teams, if you include the Blue Jays, that are above 500 so far on this season. And for the Yankees, there's a lot to be concerned about right now. And I know they might make a wild card spot, which is not what the Yankees or Yankees fans would have expected. But I have to panic if I'm a Yankees fan.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna go ahead and push the panic button here. Unfortunately, this app isn't loaded. I downloaded the panic button app solely for this segment, and of course it chokes. All right, I'll have to find another
Yeah,
one.
I at least got my watch. I can it's a little red, so I can press the button there.
Yeah, I tried to download this app, and it's just not. It's definitely like downloading a virus at this point. It keeps coming up with pop-ups, so not great. We'll have to find another panic button app here. But yeah, I'm slamming the panic button here. I just this offense outside of a few guys isn't really doing it for me. And quite honestly, the bigger problem might not even be this team. It's that the Red Sox and Rays, I really do think are going to lock up 2 playoff spots here. And I think the A's and Astros are going to lock up 2 playoff spots. So it's going to be really tough for the Yankees to get in on one of those wild card spots. I mean, as of now, I don't think they're winning that division. And the wild card race will probably be between Boston and then whoever of Oakland and Houston. So it's going to be a really tough one for them to get in the playoffs. And then in terms of, the lineup, they've still got guys like Rugnet Odor playing. Miguel Andujar, I know he's been hot lately, but he's kind of hit or miss. Gary Sanchez, I don't believe in at all. Gleyber Torres, I know he started coming around, but he's still not great. And I know that they're still looking to upgrade on him, which he'd be a good bounce back candidate for some team. And then DJ LeMahieu has really not lived up to his career norms at all, only hitting 251 right now. That's after hitting over 270 for much of the last, what is it, 6 seasons now, and only 3 homers and a really high strikeout rate, at least for him, of over 17%. So the lineup just doesn't have a jolt to it. I mean, obviously, it's got the power combo of Judge and Stanton, but you never know how healthy those two are going to stay. And then Garrett Cole, he's been good, substances or not that he's been using on the baseball. But then the rest of the rotation is kind of hit or miss. Jamison Tyon has not been as good as his Pittsburgh counterpart in Joe Musgrove out in San Diego. And then they've been starting like Michael King. I don't think he's that good. Domingo Armand's been pretty good. Jordan Montgomery's been pretty good. I don't know. I don't really think that this team is that great, and they're going to have to be great to get in a wild card spot in a pretty stacked American League landscape. So moving on to the AL Central, I mean, I shouldn't even have to ask this, I don't think, but the Minnesota Twins. I mean, I think I have to know the answer.
I don't know how the Twins ended up getting in this situation where they find themselves at the bottom of the AL Central, but you have to panic even more than the Yankees. I'll push that button a few times, but I have no idea how the Twins have gotten to this point. I mean, it's probably going to be in the rotation where Jose Berrios, who was the Twins' best starter a year ago, he's their best starter right now, 3.58 ERA, which is okay, but it's not what you want out of a number one guy. I mean, they also have J.A. Happ's 6 ERA. Michael Pineda, I talked about him earlier. He also has a 3 ERA. He's been pretty good as well. But then you have Kenta Maeda, who finished in, I believe, in like the top 2 or 3 in the Cy Young voting from a year ago. He has a 5 ERA. And this Twins rotation, the pitching staff for the Twins has always been a huge problem. And that's always been the reason why they haven't really gone past the ALDS, haven't won a playoff game in quite some time. And you have some star players in Minnesota, really everyone aside from Nelson Cruz and Byron Buxton, just not living up to their expectations. And it's in a very weak division too, which is also very surprising, where you're playing with the Tigers and the Royals and the Indians, yet you're doing worse than all 3 of those teams combined. Not combined, just doing worse than all 3 of those teams, which is definitely very surprising. I thought they were going to be neck and neck with the White Sox for this AL Central, but it's sad how the mighty have fallen really in Minnesota. I am all out on this Twins team.
Yeah, I'm all out on this team too. I don't understand how they got here. Like this is like to compare this to something in hockey or even the NFL. I mean, it's basically like, I mean, I guess the Eagles actually won something before they collapsed that franchise, so and Minnesota hasn't. I would almost compare it to the Flyers, like how last year they looked really good. Like they looked like the franchise turned a corner and then fell off the face of the earth this year. It's the same thing with the Twins. Like they have all of this young talent. Like they have Alex Kirilloff is now up and he's playing pretty well. Trevor Larnach is up and playing pretty well. And then, you've got guys like Miguel Sano is still pretty young. Ryan Jeffers is still pretty young. And then Byron Buxton, who I know has been hurt, but he's young and really good, as well as Max Kepler, who's hurt. So maybe, I mean, they've got a couple guys hurt, but I don't know how we got here. I mean, Jose Barrios has been very good, but other than that, that pitching staff is atrocious. I mean, I was actually, advocating for the Phillies to go out and sign J.A. Happ, and thank God they didn't because he's been dreadful. The 5.61 ERA so far this year, one of his worst years. He's 38. I mean, his arm might be cooked at this point. And then Matt Shoemaker and Randy Dobnak have not been very good. They've been some of the worst starters actually in the league just by looking at ERA. Dobnak has a 7.36 ERA. So I don't know. They're not going to be able to find starting pitching, not 3 starters on the market to get back in this thing. The bullpen hasn't been much better either. The offense has been decent, but when your pitching is this bad, you're not going to be able to last like that. And I don't know how they're really going to be able to upgrade on that. I mean, it's not like you just need one or two pitchers. You know, it's kind of like last year with the Phillies bullpen when they needed an entire bullpen at the deadline and just couldn't do it. You know, there's some things that you just cannot upgrade in, you know, inside of one season, and this is definitely one of those teams. I mean, fourth worst ERA right now in baseball, and I would venture to say that the starting ERA, I'll have to look that up. I would venture that the starting ERA is even worse than that, closer to the bottom of the league. No, fourth worst in starting pitching as well. So not good there in the Twin Cities, though. But moving on over now to the NL West, you know, there's not, I guess, well, I guess there's an obvious favorite for underachiever. I guess we'll go with the Angels. They've actually won 7 of 10. They're around 500 right now, but are you pushing the alarm here?
So I was never really in on the Angels in the first place, but in terms of whether or not I think they will make the playoffs, I'm gonna push the panic button. I don't think that, especially in this division that they're in with the A's and the Astros, I don't think that this team's gonna be competitive, especially with Mike Trout out for the long term. I mean, yeah, Shohei Ohtani has been really good so far, both on the mound and with a bat in his hand, but he's not going to carry your team. Jared Walsh is not going to carry your team, even though he's been a huge surprise for this Angels team. I mean, I'd be more concerned about a guy like Anthony Rendon. He has had a terrible season so far in his second year with LA. I mean, your boy David Fletcher is actually doing pretty well, Chris. He's hitting 264, which is a bit below his standards, but the big concern with this team has always been their rotation. And there's still not really been a guy that you can say, hey, he's going to be a future ace for years to come. And that's been the concern with the Angels, really ever since Mike Trout first put on an Angels uniform. He's always that Angels team has always been looking for the top of the line rotation type guy. I mean, maybe going into the year you thought Dylan Bundy could be that guy. He's got a 6 ERA right now. Maybe you thought a guy like Andrew Heaney could be a guy that can lead your team. He's got a 4 ERA right now. Their rotation is still very weak. If they want to compete, maybe go after a guy like John Means at the deadline. I don't really think you need to focus on the offensive side of things. I think you need to focus on the pitching staff. And listen, you're still in this division race if you're the Angels. They're in third place right now. They're 2 games under 500, but in the wild card race right now in that AL, they're still 5.5 games back. So if they wanted to compete and kind of go all in on this team before Mike Trout gets back, I think they can. But as of right now, I'm still pushing the panic button.
Yeah, you know, I'm gonna push. So I finally got an app here. The panic
There we
air
go.
horn. There we go. There we go. The panic air horn. Yeah, I'm very concerned because they just don't have anything that they can build off of. Besides, actually, I think Jared Walsh has been probably the best story of the season for them. Third, well, besides Otani, third on the team in homers, hitting 297 with 13 homers. But the big story here is Mike Trout's still out. I mean, I know that they're hot right now. I don't know that they're going to be able to keep it up. And with Mike Trout, I believe still being out at least another month, I don't know how they do it. I mean, there's just not enough on that team. And Anthony Rendon, I don't know what happened after he left DC, but talk about a team that has absolutely self-destructed since the World Series. It's the Washington Nationals. Strasburg hasn't been healthy. Patrick Corbin is like, I don't know what he's become, but he's become a way below average major league pitcher. And Anthony Rendon, who looked like one of the 10 best players in the game, might not even be an above average third baseman this year, hitting 232 with 3 homers. That's the big problem. I mean, when you're stars, I mean, look, this isn't Mike Trout's fault that he's hurt. But when you have Mike Trout out and your other big star not producing, it's going to be really hard to lay on Jared Walsh and, you know, Shohei Ohtani to carry this team for another month. And the A's and Astros are just too good that I don't see them being able to keep up. And then in terms of that rotation, there's just not really much there. Like I don't really know outside of Andrew Haney's been okay once again as like a back end of the rotation starter, but he's been arguably their best pitcher outside of Shohei Ohtani, of course. Shohei Ohtani's just in a different league, but outside of him, they haven't really found a lot. You know, he has a 2.76 ERA. The only other starter that has below a 4 ERA is Patrick Sandoval, and he's only started 4 games. So they're going to need more pitching. It's the same old story out there. Maybe they're a 500 team this year, but I just don't see them getting it done. So moving on now to the NL East. You know, there's a bunch of teams I could go with here. I mean, practically the whole division is underachieving. Although the Mets have had a bunch of injuries, so give them a pass there. Um, I guess the most drastic underachievement could be the Atlanta Braves. Are you pushing the panic button here?
So I think this might be the first time I'm not going to push the panic button, and it's a pretty simple reason. The NL East is the Wild West right now in terms of divisions in the MLB. And yes, the Braves are still 4 games back of the Mets right now, but all it takes is one good series against them to just get them right back in that race. And second through fifth place in that division, they're only separated by 4 games. So this division is really anyone's race right now. And this is an Atlanta Braves team that has made the playoffs, really won the division in back-to-back years. And despite Marcell Ozuna not being there for God knows how long, he's not going to be there. This offense still has some reliable pieces on that team. Austin Riley's had a great season so far, hitting 300, and Ronald Acuna is one of the top home run leaders so far this season. Ozzy Albies started to pick things up as well. So all they really need is a few more guys to kind of get back to where they once were. The main one being Freddie Freeman, who's hitting 228 so far. But I'm not even really concerned about that because he is getting on base at a very consistent rate. He is one of the top guys in terms of walks, I think it is this year. And his on base percentage is 350. So that's, I think, like a 0.120 above what his average is right now. And the pitching staff, it is going to be a big concern, although Ian Anderson has played very well. Charlie Morton's been on and off so far for ERA. But if they can really find one more piece, I feel like they can get back to the expectations they once had. I mean, they have Max Fried, who's still a younger pitcher, 27 years old, is around a 4 ERA as well. So there's guys who, if they can pick things up, the Mets, they're an injury prone team, kind of like you said, and this division is really just out there right now. If the Braves can feast on the Nationals, the Marlins, teams like that, I think they can definitely get back to those expectations of winning the division.
Yeah, I'm not going to push the panic button yet here. I kind of need to see how things fare over the next 4 to 6 weeks, I guess I would say. The main reason for concern with this team has actually been the bullpen, and the Braves have historically had a good bullpen. I mean, in typical years, they have been a juggernaut. Um, I mean, like I believe last year I'd have to go back and look at the ERA, but I want to say that they were in the top 10, and they had guys like Mark Melanson who they let go for a very low price. So they're definitely going to be shopping for some relief pitching at the deadline, and maybe that helps. I mean, as we saw today, I mean, their best, one of their best relief pitchers in, I believe it's Chris Martin, got lit up by the Phillies in the 10th inning en route to a walk-off win by Gene Segura there. They have the fifth worst bullpen ERA, 4.78, somehow worse than the Phillies, who are at 21st in the league with a 4.47. So the bullpen has been one thing. And then, really, though, there's been some breakouts on this team. Austin Riley has had a huge emergence this year. And arguably, without him and without William Contreras coming in after they had two big catcher injuries, this team would be probably 4 wins below what they are right now. Austin Riley, I think, looks like a potential all-star. He's hitting 306 with 11 homers. The strikeout rate is still high. He's still striking out at almost 28%, but offensively, he has been absolutely raking at the hot corner there. So really, he's helped to lengthen that lineup, which right now is huge because they're starting Abraham Almonte and Guillermo Heredia in the 7 and 8 hole right there. So they haven't had a whole lot to speak of from the bottom of their lineup, but William Contreras and Austin Riley stepping up is huge, and I do think Freddie Freeman will also step up. In terms of the pitching staff, the starters have been okay. I expect that they'll get better though as the season goes on. Now, moving on to the NL Central here, there's not really like an obvious panic one. I'm gonna go, I guess, with the St. Louis Cardinals, who have actually been they were leading the division for a while, but have been in free fall now, losing 8 of their last 10. So Logan, panic or no?
This is another one that's kind of really tough for me to panic on at this point. And they're the first team that we've talked about that actually does have a winning record to this point in the season. And the Cardinals are only 3 games back right now on both the Cubs and the Brewers right now in that NL Central. And they're 4 games back of a wild card spot as well. But I'm not going to panic. I mean, Nolan Arenado's had a great start to his season, and a lot of the big hitters have had pretty solid starts to the season right now. Tommy Edman, Dylan Carlson, Paul Goldschmidt, they've all hit above at least 250 to this point on the season. And then Jack Flaherty, he was a big question mark coming into the season, but he's pitched really well so far. 8-1 record, ERA under 3, and 67 strikeouts as well. So he's had a solid season as well. It's tough for me to really panic at this point on a Cardinals team that's been consistently good. I mean, we've always seen the Cardinals always find a way to make it to the playoffs, win the division, and it's a really wide open division as well in the NL Central. I mean, you got teams like the Pirates, maybe the Reds. You can start feasting off of as well once they start to trade away some key guys. But there are going to be some key battles coming up for this Cardinals team. I'm really looking forward to this Cardinals Cubs matchup this weekend. There's a 3 game series there. And if the Cardinals do sweep that series, then boom, they're right back in first place, depending on what the Brewers do this weekend. So it's really early for me to panic on this Cardinals team, especially when their star players are doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, I am gonna push the panic air horn. Hold on, let's turn. There we go. The panic air horn. um, yeah, I'm a little bit worried, mostly because Jack Flaherty's hurt, and I don't know how long he's going to be out. He's been one of the better pitchers in the game this year, at only 25 years old with a 2.9 ERA, 8-1. He's kind of carried that staff because otherwise, again, with other guys like Kwang Hyun Kim out, Miles Mikolas out, or actually, I think it's Miles Michaelis is out. They've struggled, that pitching staff, outside of those couple guys. So they're relying on like Johan Oviedo, John Gant, and Carlos Martinez, who haven't been consistent at all. In fact, right now they're going, it looks like, with a 4-man rotation and just kind of doing a bullpen start there for the fifth day. So they're really struggling. The bullpen also, outside of the top two guys, has not been that great. They're missing a couple of big throwers there in Jordan Hicks. Cody Whitley's also out. Who else do we have out there? Dakota Hudson was really good, and he had Tommy John last year. And then offensively, they're missing Paul DeYoung and Harrison Bader, as well as Justin Williams. So they're kind of banged up at the moment. And offensively, there's not a whole lot to love to begin with outside of Nolan Arenado, Paul Goldschmidt, and now actually Tyler O'Neill, who is broken out. So they're not a deep lineup, and the pitching staff is also not deep. I mean, their best pitcher is Adam Wainwright, who's like 40 years old at this point, and has a 4.03 ERA. So I don't really see how they get it done. I mean, maybe once they get healthy. It's not a great division, but the Cubs and Brewers are both hot. Speaking of the Brewers, or not the Brewers, the Cubs, I do want to quickly talk about what who was it here? It was a Patrick Wisdom has gone through there for the Cubs, and the stats that he's put up. He's been starting like every day, I believe, at third base with the Cubs just the last couple days. He's put up 8 homers in 16 games, batting at 364. He's been huge. I mean, he absolutely should be player of the week. I'm not sure if they've named player of the week yet. he went on a stretch here where he had a couple of multi-homer games. He had, in fact, 4 homers in 3 games, or excuse me, no, he had more than that. He had 5 homers in 5 games over the last couple games. So he has been absolutely tearing it up and helping to carry this Cubs offense that's been really resurgent alongside Chris Bryant. And Logan, I know that you were kind of skeptical of the Cubs to begin with, but the bullpen is also rolling right now. Do you think this is something that they can hold up?
Yeah, I was kind of skeptical, but I think the main reason why though is I expected guys like Chris Bryant, Javier Baez to all be gone at some point before the trade deadline. I didn't really expect them to be where they are right now because they traded away Yu Darvish and they were looking to kind of start that rebuilding phase in Chicago. But right now they're fighting for that division. Right now they're in first place and they've got the spark from Patrick Wisdom. Oh, by the way, I want to mention one thing. He made his debut with the Cardinals, and there have been a couple recent, like former Cardinals guys who started their career out in that Cardinals farm system, who have just made their way to other teams and really made themselves known, made a name for themselves. Guys like Randy Rosarena, Adolis Garcia. The Cardinals have had a kind of a bad history as of recent in terms of that, but back to what I was saying about the Cubs, I do expect them now to be fighting for the division for the rest of the year. I like what this Cubs team is doing right now. And Chris Bryant, I didn't expect him to kind of get back to that all-star form. He hasn't really found it in quite some time. He's hitting over 300 right now at this point in the season. And the pitching staff hasn't looked too great, but as of right now, they're getting some really good performances from their bullpen, specifically Craig Kimbrell. He hasn't really had the best stint in Chicago ever since he signed there in 2019. But he is having his best season so far and best season in quite some time. ERA less than 1. He's made 15 saves, 41 strikeouts. He's been incredible. He's probably going to be one of the Cubs All-Stars come July. And the Cubs, they're going to be prime contenders. I mean, if the Reds start to sell off some of their pieces, it's really going to be them, the Brewers, and the Cardinals. And I know a lot of people thought it would be the Cardinals divisions will lose, but right now the Cubs are showing why they won the World Series back in 2015. I think it was like 2016 at that point.
Yeah, none of these teams in the NL Central are perfect. In fact, I know that by the record, the NL East is much worse than the NL Central, but on paper, the NL East is far more talented than the NL Central, in my opinion, and deeper too. Now, I do agree. Craig Kimbrell has been outstanding, striking out almost 15 batters per nine. That bullpen has been lights out. I mean, that's that, and then the resurgence of Chris Bryant and a couple other guys in that lineup. Anthony Rizzo's kind of come alive as well there, and then Patrick Wisdom, who's been phenomenal. But the starting staff still gives me a little bit of concern. That's where they're going to have to really look to upgrade, especially now with 2 starters on the IL. They don't have a lot of depth. So that's going to be their main area of improvement at the deadline. But they're certainly in it. I mean, the core of Javi Baez, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, Wilson Contreras with this stretch has quite literally saved their season. I mean, at this point, unless they really fall flat, I don't see them having a big sell off like everybody expected going into this year. So for now, the Cubs core will stay intact until they go into free agency this offseason. So some good news on the north side of the Windy City. Some bad news though for that team, those City Connect jerseys. Not great. Logan, what were your thoughts on those?
I think I told you this before, but I think that these are the worst City Connect jerseys so far that have been released. I mean, I think every single one before this have been instant hits. Like the White Sox ones, which in the same city of Chicago, those ones were amazing. Those are probably the best ones. The Red Sox ones were really cool, as were the Marlins ones. But these Cubs jerseys, I'm just not really feeling this like light blue type color. And we talked about the chance for Cubs players potentially getting traded at the deadline. It might have been a little bit of a concern that Chris Bryant was not involved in those photographs. It was Jock Peterson, Jason Hayward. There was Javier Baez, Anthony Rizzo in there, but there was no sign of Chris Bryant, Wilson Contreras. That kind of jumped out to me. But in terms of these jerseys, I'm not really getting Wrigleyville. Like I'm not really sure. I haven't really heard that in terms of Chicago Cubs, and I don't really get why it's on their jersey. But in terms of the Nike City Connect jerseys, I think it's been great how they've been doing it so far. But I think that the Cubs one, it was probably the worst, which is saying a lot.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree with that. I don't really like it. The actually, so Wrigleyville is the name of the small neighborhood around the stadium. There, I'm looking it up right now, and like, okay, I guess like I get that that's cool, and it has the same font as the Wrigley Field. I think outside on the marquee, at the front of the stadium. But I'm not really digging the colors on this, and I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have anything that stands out like the White Sox jerseys. Like the White Sox, I don't know. I think the whole South Side thing is just a lot cooler than Wrigleyville, I think. Um, Quite honestly, I don't know if it would have been seen as copying. I'm surprised that they didn't go as like North Side or whatever, since I mean, correct me. Well, I guess you're not from Chicago either, but I feel like North Side, South Side is like a big thing in Chicago. Kind of surprised that they didn't try and play that off each other and then have an interleague game where they played with both the North Side and South Side jerseys. I think that would have been cool, but what do I know? I don't design things for Nike. But yeah, I don't know. A little bit of a letdown there. The next one's come out in a little over a week for the Diamondbacks, who are also the worst team in the league. But I'm expecting some pretty cool things from them. I mean, I could see some very cool designs going from the Diamondbacks organization, but definitely I would rank these closer to the bottom of the barrel, if not the worst City Connect jerseys that they've put out so far. But I mean, as a whole, I've liked what they've done so far with those.
Yeah, I would
I'm
have. I
No,
would
go
have. I
ahead.
would have loved the North Side South Side matchup, especially if they were to have played a game in those years. I feel like that would have been really cool. But obviously, Wrigleyville has that kind of meaning for Chicago Cubs fans. Obviously, that is something that they know really well. But diehard baseball fans wouldn't look at Wrigleyville, and they wouldn't really get exactly what's going on there. So I feel like that was kind of a mistake for the jerseys. Obviously, for Cubs fans, it might be something really cool. It might be something that they want to buy. But Southside is something that everyone associates with Chicago. That's something that everyone associates with being a side of Chicago and the White Sox. It's something that every baseball fan really kind of associates with the White Sox. And I totally get that for them, and they nailed the jersey coloring. But Wrigleyville with the light blue, I feel like it might have been a mistake.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to agree with that. And quite honestly, I mean, there's a bunch of other iconic things. I mean, obviously, yes, Wrigleyville is pretty big. But there's a bunch of other things that they should have incorporated in my mind. One is the whole fly the W thing. That's been around since the 1930s and is a pretty big thing. I mean, they have I mean, I love when they play High Hopes for the Phillies after they win, but the whole fly the W and the Chicago, their win song there for the Cubs is awesome. I'm shocked that they didn't have a patch for that. I'm shocked. I mean, I think the ivy on the outfield wall is probably one of the most iconic things in any baseball stadium. And as far as I'm concerned, I don't think that that is incorporated anywhere in the uniforms. So a little bit surprised on that one as well. A little bit surprised that there's no, I mean, I guess it's not where the stadium is, no mention of, the lakefront, I don't think, on the stadium or not on the stadium, on the jerseys as well. So I don't know. There's a lot of other iconic things from the city that weren't incorporated. I'm kind of surprised from it. I mean, I think I just don't get it. They kind of went a little bit bland with this, which I guess I get, the Cubs are one of the more traditional teams in the league. It's like the Yankees. Of course, the Yankees would have like a bland one, but because they have the tradition, like they don't allow the beards and stuff like that. They're a very traditional team. I don't know. They could have done a cooler design with it in my mind, but it's fine. It's just nothing to write home about. So now on to the final division. The NL West has two really horrible teams and three really great teams. So I mean, not really going to be a panic air horn here, but I guess who's the most surprising team? I mean, we kind of already know, but if you want to talk about them, go ahead.
Why not highlight the San Francisco Giants in one of these episodes here? I feel like we talk about the Giants a lot, but it's for a great reason. They're still in first place in probably the best division in the MLB, one of the most top-heavy divisions in the MLB. And with the Dodgers and the Padres still hanging around, the Giants still somehow find a way to be in first place in this division. I still think that they're a legitimate contender. I don't think they're going to come away with the division title, but I do think they're going to come away with a wild card spot for sure. And a big reason why their pitching staff has been absolutely phenomenal. Kevin Gausman, Anthony Desclafani, guys like that, they have just kind of turned their career. I don't want to say turn their careers around, but they've had phenomenal breakout seasons, is what I will say. And you got all that. Buster Posey still hitting very well. The offense is still very good for San Francisco. Buster Posey still hitting 336 to kind of lead that team. Brandon Crawford hitting 14 home runs with a 262 batting average. But this Giants team, if they can make one more trade at the deadline for an offensive player, and maybe that's a Trevor Story destination down the line, if they can make one move for an offensive player, I could definitely see them walking away with a wild card spot and potentially the division title if they make the right move.
Yeah, I'm still in shock. I mean, they Gabe Kapler's a wizard, man. I mean, Gabe just I guess he gets the guys going. I mean, he came out with this whole be bold thing in Philly, and I guess it's latching on in San Fran. He's done a phenomenal job out there. I don't really know how much more you can say about him. And I keep thinking, okay, the run's going to end at some point, but it just doesn't end. I mean, even right now, they got a lot of guys hurt. Going down the lineup, they have Darren Ruff, who has been really good off the bench. He's hurt. Longoria, one of their best players, he's hurt. Tommy LaStella's still hurt. Alex Dickerson's hurt, and Mike Yastrzemski's hurt. And that's on the offensive side. They still have Logan Webb, one of their better pitchers, hurt, and Aaron Sanchez is still hurt, and then a couple of bullpen arms. So it's not like they're completely healthy right now. They're actually battling a good amount of injuries. So I don't know how they do it, but they've been incredible. So I mean, props to them. I really keep thinking that they're going to fall off, but right now they look to be in the driver's seat for at least a wild card position, if not a chance at the division crown there in the NL West, which would have been shocking just really 2 months ago. But
Yeah,
no, go ahead.
no, all I was going to say is that last week we officially named our podcast a Pro Gabe Kapler podcast, and we're sticking with that for the season for however long Gabe Kapler continues doing what he's doing. But just really impressed with Gabe Kapler. Obviously, the Phillies didn't really work out for him, but I think the Giants were probably the perfect team he could have managed. Just like an older roster, just trying to get the most out of those guys, and it's working. It's leading to wins. It's leading to a first place spot in the NL West right now.
Yeah, I mean, Gabe Kapler, I don't really he's an interesting guy, but he has gotten the job done. So, I know as much criticism as he's gotten, he deserves all the praise in the world, I think, from what's happened. I mean, he's come a long way from getting booed opening day of 2018 at Citizens Bank Park and having that whole debacle with the bullpen to now leading the Giants to possibly a playoff spot in the toughest division in baseball. So big props to him. But moving on now to quickly here before we get to our final question, what series are you most looking forward to this weekend?
So I kind of alluded to this earlier on in the podcast, but I think this Cubs Cardinals matchup could be one of the best series to take place this week. It's a three-game series starting on Friday, ending on Sunday, and I kind of mentioned the implications it has on the division, but the Cubs currently 3 games up on the Cardinals for the division lead. So if the Cardinals have a good series this week, win 2 out of 3 possibly, it could lead to a potential hot streak for the Cardinals, maybe where they eventually surpass the Cubs. But it's always a fun rivalry when these two teams match up. One of the best rivalries in all of baseball. We talked about it in an earlier podcast. But this should be a fun series. It's going to be a fun NL Central rivalry type matchup.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that should be a great one. There's a couple others that I'm looking at in terms of for this weekend. Uh, it's a really tough call between for me, the Padres Mets series. I think is going to be rocking. I mean, the Mets are bringing up capacity. Our very own Logan Bourandas will be at the game. Cannot wait. Which, by the way, we're moving towards. We don't have the tickets secured yet, but we're moving towards our first of hopefully many to come, top prospects night at the park with our very own Jeremy Gaines and possibly a special guest, Mike Marandino and Jeremy Gaines from PSSN. So that'll be a lot of fun for sure. But I'm not going to pick the Mets this weekend because I'll save them for that weekend. I'm going to go with Blue Jays Red Sox. That series is going to be big for the division. You know, the Blue Jays have a great lineup. If they had just average starting pitching outside of Ryu, then they would possibly be the favorites for this division. Actually, Robbie Ray has been good too. I shouldn't discount him. But, hopefully Alek Manoah will give you some there. He's been a great prospect for that team to at least lengthen that rotation a bit. But the lineup is awesome. Vladdy Guerrero has been great. Semion's cooled off, but he's had a great season. So is Bo Bichette. So is Randall Grichuk. So fun team to watch going in a big series against the second place Boston Red Sox team. So they might be able to make up some ground here at Fenway this weekend.
Yeah, and this is a Blue Jays team in an AL East division that has 4 teams above 500. It is the Blue Jays that are kind of barely hanging in that, and they're just barely above 500 and kind of out of reach at this point of the other 3 teams. But a good series against this Red Sox team could kind of spring them back into the race. I mean, they haven't really gotten much impact from their big signing George Springer, but despite that they've just found their way to still maintain a above 500 record with Springer missing most of the season. And they've got surprise performances from guys like Marcus Semien, like you said, and then Vlad, who's just tearing the ball right now. He is towards the top of the leaderboard in home runs. And you kind of mentioned the pitching staff has always been a concern for this Blue Jays team. They kind of try to address it. Steven Matz is great at the start of the season. He's kind of cooled off to a 4.5 ERA. But Ryu, he has been great since he's joined Toronto. He's had a great season to this point. So it should be a very fun series to watch. And I know it wasn't picked, but the Padres Mets series is going to be electric. I'm going to game 2 of that series. So I'll see Marcus Stroman on the mound, not Jacob DeGrom, but seeing Marcus Stroman against Chris Paddock should be, again, not Chris Paddock, against Joe Musgrove should be very fun. And then can't wait to look forward to this end of the month top prospects at the ballpark at Citi Field. That is definitely going to be an electric time with those people.
Yeah, I mean, top prospects at the ballpark. I mean, what more could you want from PSSN's best podcast and some Phillies Mets rivalry baseball and a doubleheader? So free baseball in there, and the crowds are going to be back at Citi Field. It should be a great time. Can't wait for that. I believe that's the last Friday of the month. Yeah, the 25th. So can't wait for that for sure, and that'll be a blast. But definitely, this will be a good series this weekend between the Padres and Mets. They split that 4-game series last time out in San Diego. Will be interesting to see what happens here. I mean, the Mets have DeGrom going game 1, and he's pretty much automatic. So we'll see what the Padres can do the other two games though. But moving on to our last question of the day, we'll finish up on. So Logan, you kind of told me about this before, and I was thinking, this would be a good way to end the show. What's your favorite baseball movie out there? There's been a lot of good ones.
There have been a lot of good ones, and I think the one that kind of sticks out to me and is the one where if it's on, I'll watch it pretty much every time. It's got to be Moneyball. And there are obviously a lot of classics there, but just the way they kind of go about that, I believe it's a 2002 Athletics team and how Billy Bean kind of built that team. It was always a fun story to kind of listen to, and just kind of the players that are kind of outcasts on other teams, but they kind of join Oakland and they had this really big role. Scott Hatterberg, played by Chris Pratt, played a big part in that film. I think Chase Bradford, pitcher, like a I don't know what you kind of call that pitcher, where they have that weird throwing motion, but he was a good reliever for them. And just kind of the way that they attacked that season, kind of dive in depth into Billy Bean's rise from a failed baseball player into a GM, and how he was kind of on the hot seat for the first 2 months of the season, and then that kind of turned into being offered the biggest contract for a general manager in all pro sports, and then turning it down. That was from the Red Sox, and staying with the A's. And you can kind of argue whether or not that was a good decision by Billy Bean, but it was definitely a respectable decision. And you can see just through the actions that he makes and the choices that he makes, just choosing money over a good education early on. That kind of played a big role into why. But definitely a great film if you haven't seen it on the Athletics. And even though I'm a Mets fan, I definitely really enjoyed it just as a fan in general, just how that team was built using like modern day analytics.
Yeah, I definitely was going to pick that as my top one. For me, there's really two. Well, actually, there's a lot more than two really good ones, but my two favorites are Moneyball, which you kind of covered, and then you got to go with The Sandlot. I mean, there's a bunch of great quotes from that movie, and I think my favorite. I mean, obviously, the "You're Killing Me" Smalls, and then I love when he goes in the movie. Obviously, when Benny hits the ball and Smalls is to go get it, and it's the Babe Ruth ball. And in the movie, when he he goes, oh, signed by, oh my God, that was signed by Babe Ruth. And they're like, yeah, you keep telling me that, but who is she? And then they go through all of his nicknames, and then he's like the Great Bambino, and he's like, oh my God, that's the same guy. I love that part, and really all of it. Like when they hit the ball into the yard, I forget who says it, but they're like, it's the rule of the Sandlot. Whatever goes over the fence becomes property of the beast. It's a great movie. It's definitely different than Moneyball, yeah, because it's, I mean, obviously Moneyball is based off of a true story, but definitely two of the best movies out there. I would argue in any genre. I mean, not even just baseball movies. I think they're both just great watches.
Yeah, and you had mentioned a quote from The Sandlot. I was trying to think of a quote myself, and now I'm in the mood for s'mores because that was probably one of the more famous quotes. S'more what? When they were having that little treehouse hangout towards the middle of the movie. But now I want s'mores. It's good. We're close to the end of the podcast. I can try and start a fire, try and make one. But definitely a lot of famous baseball movies that weren't mentioned. Things like Field of Dreams, probably one of the bigger ones that I was thinking of trying to debate between. But sports movies are always a interesting thing. They're always probably some of the better movies I've ever watched. But baseball movies, there are definitely a lot more of those than just plain old sports movies. And Moneyball is my favorite. There are a lot more other sports movies that, if they're on, I'll watch it, kind of things.
Definitely. I mean, there's also though some great quotes from Moneyball. I was thinking of the one with David Justice in the film where Billy Bean goes like, "You think you're special?" And David Justice is like, "Well, you're paying me $8 million a year, so yeah." And then Billy Bean's like, "No, no, we are paying you. The Yankees are paying half your salary. The Yankees are paying you $4 million to play against them," which I just love that quote. And then there's a couple others I'm trying to think of. There's the one where he's like, there's good teams, there's bad teams, there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us. That is like an iconic quote from that movie. Billy Bean, a phenomenal movie. Brad Pitt was awesome in that movie. There's a bunch of other quotes if you go through and watch it, but really just great. I mean, it's a funny movie too. For as serious as it is, based off of real life, it is pretty funny.
How about Jonah Hill as the assistant though in that movie? Had a couple good moments trying to build that team. Him and Brad Pitt just working together as the GM assistant GM type relationship, especially like how they met in the movie too. I feel like it was a great duo in that movie, and we kind of like saw it like up until the end. Like Billy Beam, Jonah Hill's like the one person, like his character like the one person that Billy Bean actually told about the contract, and like they had like this moment at the end for a while where it's you hit a home run but you didn't even realize it type thing.
Yeah, he was great though in this movie. I love the part when Billy Bean is talking to him about, I forget what he was just kind of like grilling him. Oh, he was grilling him on about why they didn't go through with the trade in Cleveland, and he's giving him all these answers, and then I think he calls him a couple days later, and he just goes, "Pack your bags, Pete," and he's just like, "Why?" He's like, "I just bought you from the Cleveland Indians," and he's just like, "What is this guy talking about?" Like it's just so the dynamic between those two is definitely great in that movie. So, and then there's another one. I'm looking at some of these quotes now, and it's all coming back. When David Justice asks Scott Hatteberg, "What's your biggest fear?" and Scott goes, "A baseball being hit in my general direction," because it's the team of outcasts basically. I mean, it's a pretty uplifting story as well. But now I got to go watch that movie. Might have to go do that after this.
Yeah, and like the movie was made really kind of a long time ago that you forget that Chris Pratt is actually in the movie. I mean, you seeing where Chris Pratt is right now, you wouldn't realize it. And like he played a big role in that movie, but like seeing the actor he's become, it's definitely been fun. And Scott Hatterberg was like such a likable character in that movie as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. So definitely what I should correct myself. It's actually there's rich teams, there's poor teams, there's 50 feet of crap, and then there's us, which is still very true to this day in baseball.
Still
But
iconic.
oh yeah, still iconic. I mean, it's nothing has ever been more true in sports, I think, than that quote. I mean, when you look at some of the salary cap that these teams are paying, like the Orioles and Pirates, and then you go to like the Yankees. But well, I believe that this is it for this edition of Top Prospects. Well, we're going to have another good week of baseball, and we'll be back with you to cover it here at some point soon. So for Logan Bourandas, I'm Chris Lemmo, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for watching this edition of Penn State Sports Night. If you're a fan of our content, please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more clips. Also, follow us on Twitter at PSSN TV and on Instagram at PSU Sports Night to keep up with all the action. For all my colleagues, we are Penn State Sports Night.